I think at least it looks like sort of the most united for the EU, which always, of course, consists of member states, and it depends how much these back up the policies. But we've seen the EU come out before the summit, talk about China as a systemic rival on the economy, talk about China as a competitor. So completely different language from the usual sort of more bland talk of strategic partnership, and have much more focus on getting EU demands through now and here, which is also part of why, as we heard from your reporter, that there might not be a joint statement, because the EU basically wants to see some action from the Chinese side, not just more talk and talk. And so that's a little bit sort of the backdrop. That doesn't mean still, as we saw it a couple of weeks back, that member states will handle China differently. And Italy rolled out much more the red carpet, where in Paris, Xi Jinping was met more with a sort of united front, where President Macron had invited along Chancellor Merkel and the EU Commission President Juncker. So all of that is still sort of at play, of course, in the EU's China policy.
Has that been the problem with the policy, is that there's been a disconnect between member states and Brussels in terms of how to address China?
Partly. I mean, that's partly the problem. And then partly there's been sort of in the EU institutions for quite a number of years, a quite sort of rosy picture of China, and that through sort of annual meetings and bland communication would get China to change. And now there's a much more sort of hard-nosed focus of saying we need results. We need China to deliver on some of these things. They keep claiming being a developing economy that's just catching up, but they're in reality now the world's second largest economy, with their Made in China 2025. They have a plan for getting up to the higher edge on technology and other areas where Europe also wants to be. I think part of what's happening, apart from a disenchantment in the EU institution, is that also that Germany was really the pivot on this, that in the German business community there's a growing concern that China will not just be a good export adventure, but also replace Germany in a lot of key industries. And that, I think, has sort of woken up them to a tougher EU position.
Do you think there's a legitimate concern among some European countries of the likes of Huawei, a Chinese company, moving into critical infrastructure like the rollout of 5G networks?
Well, that is a big question at the moment in Europe. The Americans are pushing European allies, saying, I mean, they have, not just in the Trump administration, but actually for years been sort of shutting Huawei out of American telecoms infrastructure, and now asking European allies to do the same. And there is a big question of, I mean, I think Europeans should have learned a lesson from Russian natural gas that we saw was much more than just a commodity, but had sort of political overtones. The question of, would we want another authoritarian state, namely China, to sort of hold key infrastructure in Europe on 5G telecoms, which is going to be sort of the backbone of the new Internet of Things for European countries as well.